Hello, everyone, and good afternoon, and welcome to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. And joining me today, all the way from Nottingham, England, is an author making their official debut here on the channel. Now, my guest has been crafting stories for as long as she can remember. Her passion for storytelling began early, with one of her short stories published at just 15 years old. She went on to graduate with a first-class honors degree in primary education with a specialism in English from Bishop Grosseteste University in Lincoln, driven by her desire to inspire children to love reading and writing from a young age. And in recent years, my guest has been dedicating her writing and editing skills to publish her own novel, her debut novel, One Second More. She also has another romance novel and a romantic novel in the works. And when she's not writing, she loves curling up by the fire with a good romance or fantasy book, cuddling with her cat, and spending time with her family and friends. So, without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to our guest today, writer, author, Megan Healy. Megan, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So, before we dive into your debut novel, your upcoming debut novel,
Yeah.
what more can you tell us about your background? Is there anything else you would like to share with our viewers and listeners?
Um, I think you covered most of it there anyway, but writing and reading has always been a massive part of my life. I think you can't really match the same feeling you get from being immersed in your own writing or immersed in a book that you have really enjoyed. Um, and that's been from a very young age. So I'm glad that I'm now at the stage of my life where I can start to talk about my own writing, and very happy to be here and be able to talk about it with yourself.
Awesome. Awesome. So, as a little teaser, what can you tell us about your upcoming debut novel, One Second More?
So it's a romance. And it starts with a woman called Jessie who goes on a blind date with a guy called Andrew. Um, they get on well, but as she walks away from the blind date, she can't help but be intrigued by his friend Luke, who's also on the date, sort of as a
Mm.
supporting friend. And you sort of go on this bit of this journey with her, where Jessie and Andrew get closer, but at the same time, Jessie and Luke are building a friendship, which is sort of entangled with lust and unsaid words and unsaid feelings. But she also notices that there's like a darkness surrounding Luke, and there's a bit of like a tormented past with him. So along the way, she has to sort of decide whether to follow her heart or her head, and there's a couple of twists and turns along the way as well. Um, so yeah.
Nice. Very, very nice. So, before we dive a little bit more into the creation of One Second More, let's dive a little bit more into your background, Megan. So, in your bio, clearly you have been a very creative person growing up. I mean, you published your first short story when you were 15 years old, graduated in university with a degree specializing in primary education, emphasizing reading and writing, which I absolutely love. I think that's a beautiful thing to do to inspire the next generation to read and to write. And, working on your own story, which is just incredible. So, where do you think this passion for creativity came about? Was it a particular family member? Was it a book you read growing up? What sort of sparked this creativity within you?
Um, so I would say probably one of the earliest memories of it is when I was in year 6, and I used to just write for fun as regards to like anything that would pop into my head, I'd just write it down. And year 6, I wrote like a little bit of a book that I then printed off and stapled together and drew the little pictures for it, and brought it into school, and my teacher put it in the library for other children to read. And feeling that like accomplishment and being shared with other people was like a big spark in my head of like, this is something I love to do, and now other people are enjoying it as well. So it was a really nice moment. There've also been moments where my dad used to write stories. We'd come up with like a theme together, both go away and write our own story on it, and then come back together and read each other's works. And I mean, he will say himself he's not the best writer in the world, but he always came up with something that made me laugh and had me interested as to what he was saying, and his support was always there with that. I think as well, I've always looked into English as being sort of this escapism and world where that you can go into and look at different characters and experience new things, and that all the way through. I mean, I was a librarian in secondary school, so you can imagine being surrounded by books the whole time. It was wonderful for me anyway. But yeah, it's just always been there, I think.
Nice, incredible. I absolutely love that you mentioned that you were, a librarian, which honestly, I think that's like an amazing job being surrounded with all these different books, and pretty much you can literally pull any book and just read like on your free time to just escape, even just for a few minutes. I mean, that is really, really amazing. So now let's fast forward in your life. What would you consider your aha moment? The decision to create your own story and actually make the commitment to write out the outline and begin drafting 1 second more.
So my whole life I've sort of come up with random ideas that I've just written down. I then one year decided to reread them and see if there was anything there. Reread this one, and it just sort of, I could see it play out in my head as like a film, and I just wanted to find out where I was going to go with the characters. So then I delve into their backgrounds a little bit more, and how much I was interested in the characters sort of inspired me to continue to explore that, and hopefully meant that anyone who read it would have been intrigued by them as well. So that's sort of what made me keep writing that particular story. And then I one year set myself some challenges. I think it was the year after COVID, actually. I think it was 2021. I set myself some challenges of, right, this is what I want to do this year. And one of them was get to a stage where I was getting to the end of like completing a book. And this was the book that I felt most passionate about. So by the end of the year, I was getting to the stage where I was feeling a bit more happy with it. There was a couple of years then I had to take a step back because of work and other things. But then the last sort of year I've gone through and started to edit it and look into publishing and stuff like that. So I think it was me pushing myself as well as me intrigued by the characters that made me pursue it.
Nice. I'm actually glad that you also brought up that, you also began your journey around, COVID, because I definitely think a lot of authors definitely got their start. And that'll be a question discussed later in the interview, but I'm glad that you sort of got the ball rolling. And now, speaking of that, let's actually go into the creation of 1 second more. Okay, so walk me through it. So you're writing out probably the initial draft, or maybe you are jotting down the outline, whichever one you were at that time. What were the goals you had going forward with this book, as well as the promises to your future readers?
So some of the promises that I would say that I have with this book is you will experience a whole load of emotions. There are some moments where there's tension between the characters that make you feel tense. There's heartbreak in the story, there's upset, but there's also moments that will make you want to physically smile and not just sort of like in your head like you'll want to physically smile and laugh with them, and there's a lot of growth with the characters as well as you go through the story, and you really start to love them and want to know where they're going and how they're going to grow with the story. There are definitely moments as well where you'll be questioning sort of where is she going with this, what's happening now. Like there is definitely moments that will have you rethinking things. So I think it's not just your typical sort of romance. There are definitely different things in there to keep you on your toes.
Nice. And I'm actually glad you also brought up the fact that, it's not your standard romance story, which is something that we will touch on in the business portion. So now let's fast forward a little bit. Okay. So in your bio that you are in the process of, editing and possibly doing some rewrites here and there of your debut novel. Now, at what point did you tell family and friends that you were working on this? And what was their general reaction?
My family aren't the biggest in reading and writing, so it's very much like they support me, but it's not something that there is a passion for them. I have a friend who I'm very close with who is very much like me, loves romance, romantasy, and everything like that. So she's been very supportive, and we've sort of got our own little book club going at the moment. So there's that, and there have definitely been, like, my dad has read parts of it. People that I know have read parts of it as well, and I'm not sort of got to the stage where I've given a lot of people like the full thing yet. There have been readers who have read it, but not loads of people. There was one person who read it who said they wanted to take it into their book club, and I was like, not yet.
No,
So,
not yet.
but yeah, just mainly very supportive. I'm very lucky with my family and my friends that they're very supportive of everything that I want to do. So
That's awesome. That's really great to hear. So, of course, going forward into the future, would you consider beta readers and ARC readers for 1 Second More?
definitely. Like I said, there are a handful of people who've read it and reviewed it and said that they enjoyed it. So I definitely would look into doing that as well, and getting feedback. I think that's really helpful. And just knowing that someone else has read it and hopefully enjoyed it as well as me writing it. I think that's something that I would love to hear from people, to hear what they have to say on them, the characters.
Definitely, definitely. And I definitely think, as authors, we do love that feedback. And especially at the point when we're still in the writing phase and the rewriting phase, that's also a truly a make or break moment at that stage, because that could definitely derail an author's, confidence if, like, the initial reactions, or even, like, to use a movie term, the screen testing is not overwhelmingly positive. That can easily derail an author's confidence. So would you say that from these initial reactions that you had so far with the book at the stage it is now, that it has validated your goal and determination to finish this book, get it to where it's the final version, and then make the decision to publish it?
Definitely. I mean, people who have read it have said that they're intrigued by the characters and by sort of potentially other stories afterwards that could incorporate them. So that tells me that the characters are lovable and that they enjoyed reading it. I had one person sort of get a little bit frustrated with me because of the ending, and was like, what? Like, the ending's fine, but there is a little bit of a twist in it. So when you get that moment where you're just like, what?
Yeah.
So to have that sort of reaction from someone who's read it was wonderful. And so I'd say definitely from who have read it so far, they've definitely enjoyed it and connected with the characters, connected with the story, and definitely felt things that I wanted them to feel.
That's very good. That is incredible. And that actually leads us into my next question, which is what I call the first reflective question, and which more so talks about, the author and their book, because especially for an author's first novel, their debut novel, there is that connection to it that, it's their baby, it's their passion project that they are working on for years. And there is a hesitancy to share that with people. I've talked with a lot of authors who have said that they have written books before, but the books that I usually have them on for the show are not usually their debut novels. It's usually a novel that came after, maybe like their third or fourth. And when I asked them that question, I was like, well, I wasn't very comfortable, sharing my first novel. I just wanted to just get it out there saying, yes, I did it. And then when they published their actual novel, technically their fifth book, they view it as their first official novel. There is that hesitancy to also share it because, again, it's tied to us. And especially now in the digital age, social media is a huge help for authors and writers, but it's a 50-50 because, on one hand, it allows us to reach new readers. It allows us to interact with independent writing communities or writing groups, and that's amazing. On the other side of the coin, you definitely leave yourself to be exposed by trolls, spam, hate speech. I've had a lot of authors said that they've gotten one-star reviews from people who just don't give any other reason and they just post reviews just to be obnoxious and cruel. And that can be very detrimental to an author, especially if they're publishing their debut novel. And not to mention, imposter syndrome is always going to be there in the back of our minds, just waiting for the opportunity to strike and paralyze us. So I'm curious, Megan, throughout your journey as an author with your book, have you ever had those moments of heightened anxiety, imposter syndrome when you drafted, wrote, maybe rewrote a chapter or two? And if so, or if not, what has disciplined you to continue writing the story, editing it, and sticking to your guns, saying that no matter what happens, I am going to publish this book and continue working on the other ones after this?
So one thing I will say is if you don't feel like the writing that you've written is personal and could affect you in that way, then you're not right. I feel like everything you write, you include a bit of your soul in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't feel like that vulnerableness when you publish or when you share your writing with other people, then you're not sharing that part of yourself as much as maybe others would like for you to.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that the best novels I've read have definitely been sort of personal and emotional and something that where I've felt everything that they've experienced or whatever and want to demonstrate through the characters. So I think it is very nerve-wracking to put your thoughts and feelings on the line like that and your experiences, and I do appreciate that. But on the other side, if I think everything comes with a little bit of a risk,
Mm-hmm.
especially something that you love. And I mean, as you said in the bio at the start, I'm a bit of a teacher. I say a bit of a teacher because I'm actually going into tuition at the moment,
Oh.
rather than teaching. So, but I say to the kids all the time that you don't know unless you try, and you know, if you're not working hard for something, there's no point to it. You've got to put your all into things, and so although there is the anxiety and the risk of everything that you've just explained, you've also got the reward that is way higher than anything that other people could say for yourself and for those people who are inspired by what you've said and what you've written as well.
Absolutely, 100%. And this actually leads into a little fun question before I get into the business side. Now, this going back to what you mentioned before, that you began with this story one second more around the height of COVID. And I've definitely seen a lot of authors, have given the same answer that, they all began around lockdown, COVID, quarantine. And one of my previous guests made a post on her Instagram. Shout out to Jasmine Young for this, because thank you for helping with this question, because it's a very beautiful question. And she said that this is a golden age for indie authors. And when looking back on that, it's like, she's actually not wrong. Because during quarantine, those 4 years where we couldn't be with each other, where we were separated and we couldn't go out of our house, that literally sparked creativity. People began making music, people began creating new things. And especially for authors in the author community, we exploded. New authors emerged, and it's just a beautiful thing. So I want to hear your thoughts on this, Megan. That do you think there is a golden age of indie authors right now?
I think that it's definitely in more recent years sort of become more seen. I think book talk's probably a
Mm-hmm.
big reason for that, and I do know that there are a lot of people that will promote books, say their opinion on books, and even like scrolling through Instagram, I'll go, oh, well, that book sounds like something that I would like. And I think all those people that do promote those books and do show books that they've enjoyed and reviews and stuff like that, I think that helps a lot, because if you're just scrolling and you're not looking for it and it pops up, you're going to be intrigued by it. Whereas I think that reviews before, unless you specifically searched for something, you didn't really see it. So I think it's become a lot more sort of like in the public eye now. I would also say that, as you were saying with COVID and stuff like that, I think there was a lot of emotion during that time, a lot of confusion, a lot of sort of feelings that needed to be expressed. I think that was probably why a lot of people found that like a creative stage in their life around there, because we were sort of put away in a box such as our home, or
Mm-hmm.
our limited amount of people who could go and do their jobs or whatever. And I think being able to write or make music or whatever sort of creative output you enjoy doing, I think was a big sort of release for some people, a big way of expressing themselves and showing how they feel during that point of in time.
That's very true. That is 100% very true. And during that time, a lot of us had to really think of, how we're going to build our brand as authors, because a lot of authors also build their brand during that period. And honestly, I did the exact same thing. Like, well, I should say I started building my brand post COVID once I started realizing, okay, this is actually starting to work. Like, I'm actually making more books. I'm actually starting to gain an audience. And from there, that's when I started to create, the identity of, who I am, as well as my podcast, which now segues perfectly into the business portion of the interview, the business side of being an author. So let's begin with the first little icebreaker. So, Megan, currently you are in the process of, getting your debut novel out. And I am curious, at what point in the writing process did you do research into the publishing side, whether you want to go indie, hybrid, and traditional? And in your opinion, where do you feel 1 second more best fits in those three lanes?
So that's actually quite an interesting question, because I have sort of searched all three different uh, lanes.
Mm,
I think I like the idea of traditional, but I feel like the more that time goes on, I think, like you said before, there are more and more indie writers. More and more people are picking up like Kindles and ebooks instead. I do think there is a lot of wiggle room with stuff, and it's definitely an interesting question. It's definitely an interesting debate at the moment, sort of physical copies or ebooks, and I enjoy both. So it's hard for me to know which one would be better. So that is definitely something that I'm sort of looking into at the moment. So I don't have a definite answer for you, I'm afraid.
That's completely fine. That's completely fine. And kind of a tag on to that question, do you believe there is a gatekeeper mentality in the publishing industry? Now, I know in the US we have a lot of major publishing houses on the East Coast, Penguin Random House, Macmillan, HarperCollins, and a lot of these other titans, which a lot of authors have had the opportunity to publish into these houses, but it's very difficult to get into these big titans. And I'm wondering if it's kind of the same thing in the UK. I mean, do you guys have very powerful publishing houses in the UK?
Yes, definitely. There are definitely ones that you will go into a bookshop and see sort of lined up across the whole shelf. But I think uh, it's very dependent on sort of where you live,
Mm,
and your sort of preference of what you're reading as well. So with romance, I know that there are specific ones that will come up time and time again, and then some smaller publishers that will occasionally sort of speckle the shelves as well. But um, depending on what you read, you'll obviously see different ones in like horror or
right.
fantasy or whatever else. Um, yeah, but there are definitely some big publishers that I think is very hard to even have a conversation with unless you're established.
Yeah, and that's part of the big thing that I think turns away a lot of, debuting authors is the fact that there may be this gatekeeper mentality where it may be difficult to publish into these houses. And I will give them the benefit of the doubt because for these titans of the publishing industry, they have a business to run. They have a brand that they've established through trial and error. And I completely understand that. But with that being said, it's very challenging to publish traditionally in the sense you want to go to these titans because 9 times out of 10 they want agents from these authors to represent them because of course as you said, Megan, uh, they will only interact with you if you are established. And if I'm not mistaken, for an author to be technically quote unquote established, you would need to have published at least, I think it's like between 6 to 10 books to really get your name out there. And that's a challenge. That is a challenge because that's a lot of time and effort and money. But with that being said, indie has come a long way. Hybrid is another avenue. I know people have their own opinions of hybrid, but there have been a lot of successful authors who have gone down the hybrid route. And also, independent publishing through small traditional houses, which is another option. And I don't think a lot of people really consider that because they only think of, the big titans as traditional publishing. Any publishing house that has an established audience is traditional publishing. You just got to do a lot of research, which that is very, very stressful for us authors because we have to switch off our writer's brain and go ding, business mode. And on the topic of business mode, let's actually talk about the audience because I definitely think the audience is probably the biggest aspect or one of the biggest aspects when it comes to marketing one's book or at least crafting a story that fits in the audience. Now, for you, Megan, when you decide to write 1 Second More, as you said that this is a romance story, did you do any research into what type of romance the audience in that genre prefers? Or did you just simply write your book, not take into account, the specific tropes or clicks that audiences in the romance genre are expecting from authors?
Um, so I read a lot of romance and romantasy. I'm going to just keep throwing that one out there as well. So I'm so used to the themes and tropes and stuff like that that people sort of enjoy, and I enjoy myself, and I feel like that has definitely been something that's then influenced sort of what I wanted to write about. And so I do think that it's based off sort of what I've seen works, what I've enjoyed myself, and what I feel like I want to explore as a topic as well, because there are some topics that you enjoy to read, and other topics that are definitely something where you're like, oh, I wonder how I could incorporate that how I could put a spin on that sort of trope and adapt it for my own writing. So yeah, I've definitely had done research, but of the reading kind, I would say, probably.
Okay, all right, that's fair. Now, in your opinion, Megan, when should an author consider their audience? I know some people have varying answers on this. Some people say before they begin writing the book, others say during the marketing phase. Now, for you and where you're at right now in your journey, what's your answer to this question?
I think that it's something that you have to consider the whole way through. Sometimes you just write for yourself, and I've definitely done that a lot. I mean, I'll randomly get my iPad and type in the notes because I've just had a thought and I need to write it down quickly. And so there'll be random stories or poems or short stories on my iPad of just things that I've written for myself. But for something to be, I think, written for an audience as well, you've got to consider them from start to finish. You know, what is going to appeal to the audience? What is going to draw them in? How could you affect them with even the book cover? Because I feel like that's a big thing. The blurb, the title, I think all these little things sort of, as a reader, I get pulled in by those things. And I think a lot of people say stuff like chosen for the book cover, but stayed for the plot. And I think you've just got to sort of, you've always got to be weaving that in throughout your writing, and making sure, you know, these are things that people want to read, as well as making sure that it's something that you enjoy as well. Because if you don't enjoy writing it, then it's going to be very obvious when people read it that it's something that you're sort of bored of.
That's actually very true, and actually brought up something that we will touch on later in the interview. So now going forward, let's actually talk about the readership in of itself, because I definitely think the readership is an aspect a lot of people kind of ignore, in the sense that yes, we market to our audience, but the readership, the individual people who are going to pick up our stories, those are the people we really have to market to. And in the readership, you have the three main categories: YA, NA, and AF. AF for adult fiction. And that's not easy to do, to write in either of those three categories. They all have their own specific rules, their own types of writing, their own use of prose. But I will say this, and I think you may also agree with this, Megan, that there are some books that are meant to be for one readership group or one age bracket, but upon reading them, they are not. And I think the biggest culprit of that is, of course, YA. There are some books that are meant to be YA, but are not geared towards YA. So for you, Megan, for 1 second more, where do you see this book falling under in those three categories? And has it been a challenge to stick to that category?
You sort of set me up a bit here, because I'd say YA for mine. I would say that I agree with that there are definitely books that say YA, and then you're like, is it? It's a little bit on the, you know, adult side of things, but
The spice.
yeah, definitely. But I think that young adult is sort of a very broad term, I think, as well, because there are a lot of people that I know that are sort of 20s and read it, because technically they are young adults as well. So it's hard to know sort of the margin of what to include and what not to include. I have, because I want my family to read bits of it, I've definitely kept it young adult. But there are probably moments that other people would argue isn't, but I would say predominantly young adult would be how I would categorize my writing. In the future, I'll probably explore other avenues as well. But I think as a first book, I think that's a good aim to have. And just this book is very much focused on the romance and the tragedy and all of that, rather than, as you put it, spiciness.
All right. Now, this kind of leads into two opinion questions that I've saved just for you, Megan, because I really want to hear your thoughts on this. Now, I've talked to a lot of authors on the show, and they have said that, out of all the genres in the publishing world, romance, fantasy, or romanticity is the main genre that is dominating the publishing world. It's read 6 times out of the other genres. It's read more by any other reader. It's just crazy. So, why do you think, in your opinion, romanticy is like the titan in the book world? And as a follow up to that, this one's a very interesting one, which a lot of authors have brought up to my attention. What technically classifies a book as romance? As an example, you have a book that has, a love interest or like romance in it, but it's not marketed as a romance book. Same thing like romance fantasy. It's a fantasy world, fantasy setting. There may be a love triangle or a uh, young love or something that has to deal with romance, but it's not classified as a romance fantasy. So let's start with the first question.
um, So I think this is quite an interesting topic in general anyway, because it's definitely, as you say, it's sort of spiraled into this big thing. I think over the last few years, really. But I think the fact that people are calling specific books romantasy, I think does help those people who enjoy fantasy and romance, because sometimes you'll go into a fantasy book and you'll be hoping for sort of romance to happen, and it doesn't, and that's not the main focus. And some people enjoy going into a book and having that fantasy and having the different creatures and different sort of worlds and realms and beings, and but also having that underlying tone of romance throughout as well. And I just think when books are specified for that, it's definitely I feel like it's more of a direction for people who want that specific topic. So the fact that there's now people who are specifying this book is romantasy rather than this book is romance or this book is fantasy, for those people who want that particular thing, it's almost becoming like a subgenre, I would say. So that's probably why it's become so popular, because finally people have got the clarity on these are the books that I can read to find that genre that I love. And that's largely, I think, to do with, as I said before, like BookTok and Instagram and stuff like that as well, and the things that people are recommending. There was also a lot of sort of uproar about ACOTAR, Court of Thorns and Roses, when that came out, and that became a big hit as well. And now with Fourth Wing and everything like that, become so popular that it sort of brought the whole genre up into sort of the public's eye, and people have just gone wild for it. So I think it's definitely interesting, because when I was younger, I read fantasy and I read romance, and I didn't realise that you could get specific books that were romantasy up until, like, say, the last few years. So I think there will probably be people who used to read like Twilight and stuff like that have now realised that these other books exist like that, and they can experience new worlds with that similar sort of topic and genre within them.
Nice. So, going to the second question, in your opinion, Megan, what classifies a book as a true romance fantasy as opposed to a fantasy book that has romance in it?
I think it's got to be one of the key points within it. It's got to be a key point of growth within it. And I think a lot of romantasy that I have read has been there have been two ways that it's been going. So there's been like the fantasy storyline, but in the background as well, there's also been like this tension and simmering heat between two characters. And they do cross over, but they're the two sort of like main lines of where the story is going. And it is very clever how authors do it in such a way that you sort of are immersed in the fantasy world, but also are desperately trying to work out what's going on between the characters.
Absolutely. And that is, very, very true, because it definitely brings into question, for other genres, like what classifies a book as, sci-fi, fantasy, or historical fiction, or anything like that. It has to be integral to the story. Like, you can't have like it be like one and then the other one's on the back burner. It has to make sense, because people are going to feel that it's just an add-on. It's not really part of the main story. And that, of course, comes with a lot of, training, trial and error, and really honing one's craft in storytelling. Which, going back to what you said, there's a lot of authors, a lot of books that have emerged, in this period of, people trying to find their voice, and, all the different tropes and trends that have emerged. But I definitely feel, as authors, we have this balancing act where we want to showcase our individuality as authors, but we also want to show respect to the source material that we are writing in, as well as making something that's familiar to our audience. And it's not an easy thing to do. And sometimes authors can be pigeonholed into one category of writing or one style of writing, where they feel that they can't cross genre, that they can't, explore who they are. I've seen books that have had, the taglines, so and so meets so and so. Perfect example, Dinosaur Princess by Victor Milan, the late Victor Milan, where his book is described as Jurassic Park meets Game of Thrones. Now, I've never read either of those books, but I instantly had an idea of what to expect, and I was not disappointed. But generally speaking, as authors, that's not really good for us, because we don't want to be just, so and so meets so and so, or have all these tropes and be known just for that. We want to showcase who we are. But again, we want to make sure our book is familiar to the reader and the audience. So for you, Megan, how have you been able to balance these two in your own writing?
So it, I mean, I've been my main focus has been 1 Second More, which is a romance novel. I've also got another one, which is Memories of Him, which is a romance, but that's currently still in the writing process of that one. And there's one that I've sort of touched on over the years that is, I would call romantasy, which is the Survival Academy. But that again is in the writing phase and it needs a lot of editing, so it's nowhere near ready to be read. But I think it's definitely one of those things where it's what do you want out of this book? What do you want the readers to get out of this book? And there are definitely authors that I think have gone into different genres and been successful with changing to different genres. I think Lindsay Kelk, I think, has more recently gone from romance to a fantasy book, and she's about to publish her second fantasy book in the series. So I think it's definitely, as you said previously, become a time where people can really explore their creativity, and it's become a lot more sort of well known, like people reading books and getting into those different subgenres more recently. So I think that's definitely helped with a lot of readers exploring different topics and genres.
Absolutely, 100%. And this leads to probably one of my personal favorite questions in the interview. So brace yourself, Megan. This is a heavy hitter. So,
Okay.
to give context to this question, I've been doing podcasting for 6 years, and this show in particular on YouTube for almost 3 years. And in the process, I've had the opportunity to meet right now, I think, 119 authors. And from these authors, I have learned so much from them. I've learned a lot of great information. I've learned tips and tricks about the publishing industry, as well as marketing to one's audience, and many more. And the one thing I've learned in 6 years of doing this show is that there are two roads for us authors: to be or to be known. To be an author is an individual who's dedicated solely to the craft of storytelling, not motivated by money. To be known as an author is an individual dedicated to marketing, going on podcasts like these, going on other shows, whether it's a live broadcast like their morning show or something to really get their name out there. And both paths have their own hurdles, trials, tribulations, with the end goal being world renowned status or international status or even award winning, whatever one it may be. But there is an important note to this, which is for first time authors, and a lot of guests have said the same thing, the second path is the most enticing, but leads to a lot of unrealistic goals and expectations. And the harsh truth about this industry is that there is no guarantee your first book is going to be your star. It's not going to be your one that gets your name out there. There are exceptions to that rule, of course. There are many authors whose first books did give them award winning status. That is a huge achievement. But generally speaking, you have highs and lows in this industry. It's a 50-50 chance. And sometimes a lot of authors who go into this industry for the wrong reasons, they lose their passion for writing quickly. One guest in particular mentioned how a friend of theirs wanted to get into this industry because they believed it was a get rich quick scheme, learned the hard way that it's not. It is not. Whether you're traditional, hybrid, or indie, it is not. It is a grind. It is a hustle. So, Megan, I turn over to you to hear your thoughts on this question that, yes, in this industry, there is a 50-50 chance your book will be a success or possibly a financial flop. But that shouldn't stop you from honing your craft as an author if this is truly the industry you want to dedicate your time and effort, because it is a lot of time and effort, because you are setting aside time in your day to craft something that you are passionate about.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think if you're not passionate about it, like you say, that you very quickly fall off the need to write. And I do think it's interesting with what you said about to be and to be known. I think that's really quite an interesting sort of summary of it. And I do think they very much intertwine with each other. And in order to be known, you've got to be able to write and enjoy it and love it and do it for that.
Mm-hmm.
And to be known, I feel like if you don't have that passion, then you're less likely to be known anyway, because the readers who read your work are more likely to hear the passion in your writing than they are. I feel like most books that I read, if the author is passionate about a topic, I can sense it in what
Mm-hmm.
they've written. And it's the same with, to be fair, it comes up a lot with teaching, because you get specific topics and that you have to teach, obviously, and trying to find a book that will fit within those topics can be quite tricky. But there'll be authors that will specifically go, this is a topic that's learned at school, I will write a book about this topic. And you can tell when it's a book that they've written purely to make
Mm-hmm.
money because it's something that teachers will read, or a book that they've enjoyed reading and it's a topic they enjoy writing, they enjoy writing as well, because it's something that pulls you in as a teacher as well. Like, you can definitely tell. But there are definitely, signs and pluses and negatives for both. And I mean, my whole life I've known that writing hasn't been like a moneymaker. It's been very much a passion that if it does go into something is wonderful, and if it doesn't, then it's something for myself, and it's something that I enjoy anyway. And I think they're the best type of authors anyway, because if you're not passionate about something, then what's the point in doing it?
Absolutely. And I definitely think in this industry, which we haven't talked about, or maybe not as much, is networking and connecting. And that's a huge media tool for us authors because it allows us to connect with new people, to learn new skills, and how to use social media properly for authors. Like, I've now gone on to use, my personal platform on LinkedIn, YouTube, and my own other handles to really reach out and meet new authors and make connections. And it's a beautiful thing. So for you, Megan, who would you like to give a personal shout out to who have really helped you on your journey of publishing your book 1 Second More down the road?
I would, so my favourite author of all time, and also the person who has supported me the most author-wise, would be Paige Toon. She is the first person who, when I read her book, I was just like so into whatever she was writing, and the characters, and I was obsessed with it. And each book that she published, like I is on my, like, I need to read it as soon as I'm pre-ordering it. And she's the way that she crafts her characters it's just incredible, and the tension and the will they won't they, but also like the torment, and it's wonderful the way she writes. It's beautiful. But about 5-6 years ago, maybe longer than that actually, I sent a message to her on Facebook, not expecting anything from her, as she's quite a renowned author. But she responded and gave me some advice on writing and publishing, and she was really friendly. And then last year, I actually went to a author interview and met her in person and said to her, I don't know whether you remember me, but this is, something I've done. And whether she did or didn't, but she said she remembered me. And I told her a bit about my book, and she was very enthusiastic about it and wished me all the luck in the world. And, to take the time to reply and take the time to actually connect with people who are inspired by you, I think is wonderful. And she's definitely, I think, forever going to be up there for me.
You know what? I have to agree. That is, quite the connection to connect with, like, one's favorite author and to learn from them and just meet them is, a dream come true. And my ultimate dream, almost in the same mindset, is meeting one of my favorite authors that I've loved since middle school and high school is Bernard Cornwell. And for those who do not know who he is a world-renowned historical fiction author and fantasy author. And many of you have probably seen his shows, the Sharp series with Mr. Sean Bean from the 90s. And if you watched BBC One and Netflix, the Last Kingdom series, which was adapted from the Saxon Chronicles. And if you enjoy King Arthur, well, he's written the Arthurian Chronicles, or Arthurian Legends, as it's called. And he is someone that I've been desperately trying to get on the show for years. To have him would be a dream come true. And as we near this amazing interviews end, Megan, here is the final question I give you. With everything you've learned thus far of being an author, from its highs and lows, connecting with other people, learning, tips and tricks from them to hone your craft and further refine your skills as an author. What is your word of wisdom to fellow writers and authors watching and or listening to this interview right now?
I would say that whatever you write, your characters should feel like real people. They should be flawed, complicated, deeply human, and you should be able to feel what they feel both writing and reading it. And another big one will be, you'll have doubts along the way, a lot of doubts. You'll doubt yourself, you'll doubt your writing, you'll doubt everything. But someone out there needs to hear the story that you tell.
Absolutely. That is probably a beautiful ending to this amazing interview, Megan. And with that, viewers and listeners, this concludes another amazing author interview on the channel. I want to give a huge thank you to Megan for making her official debut here on the show. Now, Megan, where can people reach out to you on social media if they wanted to say hi or stay up to date with your progress of 1 second more?
So currently it's only on Instagram, which is m_l_healy writes. But in the future, I'll be looking into different platforms as well.
Awesome. I will link that down below in the description of this video. Thank you everyone for joining us for another author interview here on the channel. Again, a huge thank you to Megan for making her official debut. We wish her the very, very best. And as a final add-on, do you have an idea of potentially you'll make an announcement for 1 second more of when it will be either up for pre-order or its eventual release?
My hope is that this year will be the year that it's published. Hopefully traditionally. If not, I will be going down different routes because I feel confident about this year. This year is the year.
Awesome. Well, make sure to follow Megan on her social to stay up to date with her journey with 1 second more. And when it is updated, that it will be published on either site that she is using, I will link that down here on this video so you can go and pre-order and reserve your copy. And one final note, viewers and listeners, again, if you are looking to jumpstart your career in the publishing world, make sure to check out Audio Mazes. It is an independent audiobook company specializing in immersive, character driven, and multi narrative choice stories. So I will link that down below in the description of this video. If you're an author, editor, narrator, sound designer looking to try something new and be a part of a new community, we're always looking for new people to join us. So make sure to click that link down below and make sure to check out our merch store as well. We have some amazing things from our upcoming books this month and the month after. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for another interview. This is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill, wishing you a wonderful day and asking you to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, wherever you are in the world, whether it's morning, evening, or afternoon, take care.